Silicon Valley is a magical place where people in hoodies can ask for $1 billion to invent a smart toaster that also mines Bitcoin, and someone will give it to them. But today, we're not talking about toast. We're talking about the undisputed heavyweight champion of corporate faceplants, Theranos. It's 2003. A 19-year-old Stanford dropout named Elizabeth Holmes bursts onto the scene. She's got the whole package: the intense stare, a wardrobe consisting entirely of black turtlenecks like a minimalist ninja, and a voice so deep it sounded like she was narrating movie trailers in a well. And she has a world-changing idea. What if, instead of those giant, scary needles that suck out vials of your precious life juice, you could run hundreds of medical tests on a single tiny drop of blood from your fingertip? Cancer, cholesterol, diabetes, all diagnosed from a pinprick. It's the holy grail of medicine, and you could do it at your local Walgreens while you wait for your prescription for foot fungus cream. The vessel for this miracle? A sleek, mysterious black box called the Edison. Holmes was a marketing savant. She sold this vision so hard people were practically throwing money at her. We're talking over $700 million from bigwigs like media mogul Rupert Murdoch and the Walton family of Walmart fame. She assembled a board of directors that included former Secretaries of State like Henry Kissinger and George Shultz. These are people who handled international crises, but apparently the question, so does the box work, just never came up. Now, running the show behind the scenes was her secret boyfriend and company president, Sunny Balwani, a guy with zero background in medicine or biology who ran the company with the gentle, encouraging management style of a hungry bear. So they've got the money, the hype, the power board, just one tiny, insignificant little problem. The magic box was a magic fraud. The Edison machine, this revolutionary device, was internally nicknamed the Gluebot because it was literally built from a robot arm designed to dispense glue, and it was about as good at blood testing as you'd expect a glue robot to be. It failed quality control constantly, parts would fall off, and the results were pure chaos. In one now legendary test to see if the machine could detect syphilis, it failed to identify known positive samples most of the time. Then when they tested their own employees, the machine concluded that a quarter of the Theranos workforce had syphilis, which, if true, would have made for some very awkward HR meetings. So how did they run a national blood testing operation with a machine that couldn't tell the difference between a healthy person and a 17th century pirate? Simple. They didn't use it. This is the best part. They secretly bought a bunch of regular, boring, off-the-shelf blood analyzers from a company called Siemens, the kind every other lab in the world uses. They take the tiny finger prick blood sample, secretly dilute it with saline to create enough volume, and run it through the Siemens machine. This is the scientific equivalent of buying a frozen pizza, scraping off the toppings, putting them on a piece of cardboard, and calling it artisanal. It completely destroyed the accuracy of the results. For investors, they put on a little show. They'd take a blood sample, pop it in the Edison in front of the money people, and then say, let's go on a tour while this processes. While the investors were admiring the break room, an employee would sneak the sample out, run it on the Siemens machine in a hidden lab, and then type the results back into the Edison, which would triumphantly print them out. A literal magic trick. This whole house of cards stood for years until a couple of young employees, Tyler Schultz and Erica Chung, realized their dream job was a public health nightmare waiting to happen. Schultz, whose own grandfather, George Schultz, was on the board, tried to sound the alarm internally, but Grandpa Schultz was so captivated by Holmes, he basically told his grandson he was wrong. Eventually, Schultz and Chung became sources for a Wall Street Journal reporter named John Carreyrou, who refused to be intimidated by Theranos' army of lawyers and finally exposed the whole thing in 2015. The fallout was spectacular. Walgreens and Safeway pulled out. Federal regulators declared the labs a danger to patient health. And in 2018, Holmes and Balwani were indicted on multiple counts of wire fraud. After lengthy trials, they were both found guilty of defrauding investors and sentenced to over 11 and 12 years in federal prison, respectively. So the company that was once worth $9 billion, more than Uber at the time, collapsed to nothing. All because a handful of very powerful people were so desperate to believe in a good story, they forgot to check if any of it was true. It's a lesson that if something sounds too good to be true, it might just be a glue robot in a fancy box.